Good day! This is Joshua Baker, the owner of Cinderella's Wedding DJs and Event Services, and this is somewhat of a special video because typically I don't showcase just the toast. In fact, I usually just use little clips for the gig logs, but this one's special because with, as I said before, 5 speeches involving 7 people plus a blessing, that's 8 people in total over the course of 37 minutes. How did people not get bored? And the honest to God's truth is they were all just awesome speeches and toasts. Heartfelt and funny and funny and heartfelt and back and forth again. You got to check it out. And now if we could please have everyone's attention directed towards the bride and groom's head table, we're going to proceed with our speeches and toasts. The first of which is going to be from the father of the bride and the brother of the bride. A round of applause for Neil Haldane and Christopher Haldane. So I'd just like to thank everybody for coming here tonight on this cold and blustery afternoon and morning, not even morning. You guys got a great view of the bridal party coming in from outside, but we got a great view as the bridal party coming in and seeing your energy and your warmth and your good wishes. So thank you very much for being here today. I'm going to start with a confession. Laura, you're involved in this as well. Laura and I are adventure princesses. So this is a program, the Dad and Daughter program from the YMCA in Livonia. And some of my fondest memories of growing up with Laura are going to these. And I have practiced this like a million times and I've broken up every single time, even in the pool yesterday. So I was talking to myself in the pool. So it's a Dad-Daughter program. This is Golden Zebra. I'm a Rapid Scribe, and so we were part of the Sioux tribe. It used to be Indian princesses, but then Indian princess was kind of not politically correct, so they switched it to adventure princesses. So once a month we'd get along with our whole bunch of other dads and daughters, and we'd go to somebody's house, and we'd have some activities, and we'd do some kind of sort of tie-dye or some kind of crafts, and we always had snacks, lots of snacks. And then once a month or so, the whole federation, all these dads and daughters would get together, and we'd go out and go bowling, we'd go roller skating, and we'd do pine car derby. Pine car derby is evil. I'm a college professor, no skill whatsoever with woodworking. The dads who worked at GM and Ford and Stellantis would take their pine cars to the wind tunnel, to the paint shop. They had special oil for the wheels. We made a roll of lifesavers out of our block of wood. We made a bus. And we made a pencil. They made, Mustangs and Camaros out of those. And then every three times a year we do a camp out. So fall, winter, and spring we do a camp out. And these camp outs would be up north at a YMCA camp or a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout camp. And some of my fondest memories are doing that. Going ice skating, hiking, we'd have a bonfire, even had daddy-daughter dances there sometimes. No, I'm not going to make you recite the names of the Indian princesses. But my fondest memories occur after midnight. So imagine a bunkhouse filled with about 6 or so dads, probably 6 or 8 little kids on the top bunk, kind of making noises and squeaking. The dads are doing snoring and other noises that we don't want to talk about. And so Laura, if you don't know her, she was blessed with a very small bladder. And so invariably, sometime after midnight, she'd whisper down to me, "Dad, I've got to go to the bathroom." So sometimes the bathroom was in the cabin, which was really nice. Other times it was not so nice in the cabin. So we had to take our shoes, put them on, we had to put a coat on, we had to go schlep outside into the cold. And that's where my fondest memories are. We'd be holding hands. We're the only people awake in the whole world, and the whole place is filled with endless possibilities. And so to cry anymore, I recently read a book, Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, and there were a couple of sort of parts in that really sort of resonate with me, and one of these was, there's a dad who was facing kind of an empty nest, and his kids are kind of growing up, and so he's talking and sort of trying to tell why he doesn't feel a little melancholic. And here's what he had to say. "When you were little, and I walked too fast, You would run to catch up with me, take hold of my hand, and those are the best moments of my life. Your fingertips in the palm of my hand. But the moons passed quickly, Laura. And she found that her adult fingers fit in somebody else's palm really well. And that's John. So we welcome John to the family. But this handoff, okay, that's a little play on words there. This handoff has a little complication because John brought a little different color scheme into our world. All right? So we were a green and white household, and John's family was not a green and white household. So we had some conversations, and we're going to do a reenactment of these conversations, sort of in real time, but sort of condensed. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So Laura had to tell me some things about John when she first met him in 2019. You want to read the first one, please?
Are you okay that John went to U of M?
Okay. Maybe that's the only school he could get into, so I guess that's okay. Number 2.
And that he was in the marching band?
Oh my God. Marching band, U of M, that stupid fight song. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Next.
By the way, he's also finishing up his doctorate at U of M.
Really, there are hundreds of schools that you can get a degree from. Why do you have to get it from the same damn place?
And he's teaching at U of M.
Well, of course he's teaching at U of M. That just goes with the flow. All right, that's perfect. And finally...
Dad, we found a house in Ann Arbor.
So they moved to Ann Arbor. It's just perfect. So John, welcome. The colors are okay. I still cannot root for you on Monday. I'm sorry. So I'd like to bring the brother of the bride and Golden Arrow from the Adventure Guides to deliver a Scottish toast for us.
As you can tell by the plaid and the color scheme, we're really leaning into this Scottish theme for today's wedding. So I will be giving the traditional Scottish toast. May the best you have ever seen be the worst you will ever see. May a mouse never leave your girdle with a teardrop in its eye. May you always keep hale and hearty till you are old enough to die. May you always be just as happy as we wish you always to be. And then you finish that by saying Slán Siva. So it's up to them. Slán Siva.
Another round of applause, please, for the father of the bride and the brother of the bride. I would now like you to keep that round of applause going for the father of the groom. Let's hear it for Mr. Bruce Beaumont.
First off, I'd like to reiterate Neil's thanks for everybody coming out on this evening. We've got a lot of people coming from several states over at considerable expense, but just to show the love for John and Laura means a lot to all of us. And I gotta admit, probably a year ago when John and Laura said that they're gonna have a wedding ceremony and reception in Michigan on January 5th, my first reaction, are you crazy? Don't you know what the weather's like in Michigan in January? And they're like, oh, Dad, you're so old school. There's global warming. It'll be a fine day. Don't worry about it. And sure enough, we haven't had snow any time this year yet. And our snow removal contract's been a waste of money so far, but we'll see. But I'm not here to talk about the weather. I'm here to roast John. Excuse me, Freudian slip. Toast John. John was like any other child at a young age, a very curious person. But as opposed to our other two sons, Matthew and Christopher, he didn't take the simple answers that the father would tend to give to him. For example, Chris and Matt would ask, hey, where does this thunder come from? And I'd say, oh, that's God and the angels up in heaven bowling. And Chris would say, oh, God's having a good day. He's getting a lot of strikes. As opposed to John, one day he came up and said, hey, Dad, how do calculators work? And I said, oh, that's a whole bunch of zeros and one and a little bit of magic. And he rolled his eyes and left the room. And for the next several days, he was going on Google websites, trying to find out the information, YouTube videos, Reddit chat rooms, and finally announced that, hey, I think I can build a calculator. I said, okay, John, knock yourself out. This is like a middle schooler. And so the next day he goes to the bank account, cleans it out, and for those people that remember Radio Shack, he went there and bought a whole bunch of parts. And I tell you, being a proud father, a week later, and $100 worth of parts later, he comes down and had a calculator that worked just as well as any you'd find at Best Buy for $10. And in his college days, he did the same thing, bought parts and made 2 computers from scratch, one he's still using. Again, probably 3 times the price you could have got him at Best Buy as well, but he's learning. And a final anecdote, one kind of classic story in the Beaumont family, is we were traveling to Wisconsin to see the O'Connell family. Are they here today? You'll be seeing them on the dance floor here shortly. Love the boogie. So we're going to see Mary and her family. And we just crossed the Wisconsin state line, and all of a sudden John pipes up in the back seat and says, hey, Dad, can we stop this next town up here? I said, sure, John. I'm thinking, he wants to take a bathroom break or maybe get a snack. But no, it turns out that there is a welding supply store that's open to the general public, open till noon, or till 5, excuse me. And I said, well, we can stop, but what possibly thing could we need at a welding supply store? And he says, oh, I'd like to get some liquid nitrogen. Oh, this can't be well. I said, John, what do we need liquid nitrogen for? He says, well, I've been reading about the space program, and NASA developed this frozen ice cream treat that the astronauts could take up there. You might have seen them at Cedar Point or Disney World, Dippin' Dots. And he says, I think if I make some custard and get a turkey baster and drop them in one at a time, we'll have ourselves some Dippin' Dots. And by golly, the next night, the whole family had some Dippin' Dots. Hey, Mary, how'd they taste? You remember that? Delicious. Delicious. The most expensive ice cream you'll ever have. But all joking aside, we're paying a heck of a lot of money at University of Michigan tuition to getting some practical knowledge. You figure things out yourself is probably a sound investment, and we appreciate the quirkiness of John in doing some of these projects. The good news for Laura is they've been dating for over 5 years. She knows about John's quirkiness and some of his habits. She accepts it and loves him for it. And from what I've known from Laura over the last 5 years, she's got a few quirks as well. And John's grown to love that. And we think that acceptance should lead to a very strong and long marriage. If that happens to include a couple of grandbabies, so much the better as well. But no pressure. But the clock is ticking, you're not getting younger. But in closing, I'd just like to offer a toast to my namesake, Jonathan Bruce Beaumont, and his lovely bride, Laura Elizabeth Haldane, as they celebrate their first day as Mr. and Mrs. Haldane Beaumont. Cheers.
Another round of applause, please, for the father of the groom. And next we'll have the brother of the groom, Mr. Matthew Sermont. Why don't you come on over here, Matthew? You can applaud for him as well.
Thank you. My name's Matt. I am John's brother. I have another speech about John being weird, so I'll try to keep it short. So, for any of you who have ever done like premarital counseling or any kind of couples therapy, you might have heard of this concept called the 5 love languages, which is basically the ways that we show affection towards the people that we love. And so, for some people, it can be giving gifts or positive words of affirmation. Anyone who knows John knows that he's a big acts of service guy. Now, being the eccentric that he is, it's not always entirely clear what the act actually is, or even who the act is specifically for. But one thing that's certain that is that if you invite John to an event and he cares about you, he's definitely going to do something. And this can range, like my dad said, of cooking you a meal, but instead of using an oven, using a tank of liquid nitrogen. Or it can be his version of a groomsman's speech, which quickly devolves into a one-man show tune. A gesture that, while I very much appreciated in my wedding, I will not be reciprocating tonight. But one of my favorite memories about John is the way that he gives you Christmas presents. Now, I'm not talking about the actual gifts themselves, which are very nice. I'm talking about the experience that John puts together when you open your present on Christmas morning. So, John doesn't really believe in the traditional idea of putting your present under a tree where you could naturally find it when you wake up in the morning. Instead, the way that Christmas works at our house is everyone goes to sleep, John gets to work hiding these presents throughout the house, and then coming up with increasingly elaborate clues, riddles, and puzzles that you have to solve in order to find out where your Christmas present is. And this quickly devolved into this one-man game of one-upsmanship where John felt like every year he had to outdo what he did last year. So most of the family would go to bed at around 10 p.m. John would stay up all night putting together whatever maze or whatever he was going to do this year, finally fall asleep at around 5 or 6 a.m., only for the rest of the family to wake up at 7 a.m. ready to open presents. So if anyone wants to see pictures later, there's a couple we have of the rest of the Beaumont family on Christmas morning, smiling and looking happy, and John is near catatonic on the couch because he hasn't slept all night. So my favorite year was a year where John decided to make a bomb that the family had to defuse together. Now, I'm saying bomb in quotations because there was not any actual form of explosive that was attached to it, but based on my understanding, the rest of this device functioned the way that an actual bomb functions. It was a shoebox that had a bunch of wires, and as soon as you open it up, there was an LED screen that had a timer that would start counting down with instructions saying that we had this amount of time to defuse this bomb in order to save Christmas and find our presents. And that throughout this sea of wires, there was one wire that had some kind of kill switch that would save Christmas. Failure to find that wire in time, or if we accidentally clipped the wrong wire, would result in the bomb detonating. Now, luckily, it turns out that John is a very benevolent bioterrorist because I think he had to restart the timer a couple of times based on the mistakes we made. But eventually we did find and cut the right wire, and we saved Christmas, and we got our presents. You're welcome for our service. Another love language that John has is quality time. Now, anyone who knows John probably knows that he's one of the easiest hangs on planet Earth because he is one of the most agreeable people that you will ever meet. If you invite John to something, he will say yes, and he will show up. It doesn't matter where you're going, who you're going with. If you're doing something that he would actively dislike, if you invite John, he will come. And one of my favorite memories is I was home from college and I wanted to see this movie called I'm Not There, which is a biopic about Bob Dylan, who's one of my favorite musical artists. I couldn't find anyone else to go, so I asked John, and John said, sure, and he came along with me. Anyone who's not familiar with this movie, it's this very weird experimental movie where there are 6 different actors who play Bob Dylan. Each one is supposed to represent a different aspect of his public persona. And the story is told in this very surreal, non-linear way. It's a really weird experimental movie. And even as a big Bob Dylan fan, I walked out of this movie feeling like I understood maybe 50% of what we had just seen. And at times it kind of felt like more of a chore than an enjoyable experience. And I turned to John, who was 16 at the time, and I said, John, did you like the movie? And he goes, yeah, I thought it was good. And I said, do you feel like you understood it? And he said, I think so, I just have one question. Who is Bob Dylan? But anyways, Johnny's a very charming and affable person with a lot of great qualities. One of his drawbacks at times is sometimes John is so up in the clouds with his schemes and whatever he's working on with that week that he doesn't always necessarily understand how his actions, or in particular his lack of time management, affects the people around him. And because of that, there was a part of me that always worried if John was going to be able to find someone who could celebrate his best qualities while embracing some of these more, let's just say, John qualities. And then he met Laura. And the first time they came to visit my wife and I in Chicago instantly abated all of those fears that I had. So John was in town to run the Chicago Marathon, and he had told me that this was one of the first weekends where Laura was going to spend meaningful time in Chicago, that she kind of wanted to see the city while she was there. And I said, that works out perfect. The first day that you all are here, I actually have to work. So why don't we do this? One of my favorite things to do in the city is the architecture tour. For those of you who don't know it, they put you on a ferry that goes down the Chicago River. They point out these really cool buildings, tell you the stories about them. I said, why don't you guys do the ferry tour, and then we'll meet up with you at 7 o'clock for dinner. So we booked them 2 tickets for the 12 o'clock boat. It takes about 30 to 40 minutes to get there, so we sent them on their way at around 11, and we said, we'll see you guys later. I got a text from John at about 12:30, said, we got lost on the way, didn't make the 12 o'clock boat. I talked to the guy, he said he'll put us on the 2 o'clock boat, so we're gonna do that. And I said, okay. I think the Mag Mile is pretty close to where you guys are, so if you guys want to walk around, look at the stores, do all that, you can do that and then hit the 2 o'clock boat. John said, sounds good. I got another text from John at about 2:30 that said, we lost track of time while we were walking around. We missed the 2 o'clock boat. Talked to the guy, they're gonna put us on the 4 o'clock boat. I said, okay, there's a Ghirardelli's chocolate shop in that area, and they do these big sundaes. They're really good. If you guys are just looking for something to do, you want to get a sundae, maybe do that. They said, sounds good. Got another text from John about 2 hours later. It said, ice cream took longer than we thought. We missed the boat. It was at this point that I stopped texting John. He said, don't worry, we talked to the guy, they got us on the next boat. Long story short, I think we got a text from John at around 7:30 that said, got on the boat, was really fun, thanks for the recommendation. And then he sent another text after that that said, I don't think we're gonna be able to meet you at 7 o'clock today. So it's at this point that they're on their way home. I said, just get here, we'll find some place to eat, whatever. I was really worried that we were gonna get back and John was gonna be kind of in his normal John mood and that Laura was just gonna be furious. And instead they walked through kind of arm in arm, hand in hand, just kind of, both happy as could be. I asked Lauren how the day was and she said, oh, it was great. We got turned around a couple of times, but more or less said, I would never turn down an adventure with John. And it was at that point that I wanted to turn to my brother and say, John, marry this girl. But luckily John knows a good thing when he sees it. He didn't need that advice from me, and here we are today. Laura, we're so happy that you're a part of the family now. I wish you both health and happiness, and I just cannot believe that this wedding actually started on time, but I'm glad that it did. And with that, why don't we all raise our glasses to John and Laura.
Another round of applause, please, for the brother of the groom. And again, we'll keep that round of applause going for the matron of honor, ladies and gentlemen, Brooke Conlon.
Thank you. I do need my paper. Thank you. Sorry, I got too excited about the ears. If you're old enough to know what Radio Shack is, like Bruce mentioned, hopefully you're old enough to know Blue's Clues. I'm blue and this is magenta right here. But hi everyone, I'm also going to say thank you again for being here to celebrate John and Laura. And my name is Brooke, by the way, as our teacher said. Laura, from dressing up as our favorite cartoon characters to dressing up for both of our wedding days, you've become more of a sister than a biffle. Best friend for life, if you don't know. And I love the story of our friendship. From fighting over friends in elementary school, our brief stint of not talking in middle school when I went to the pink side, and then reconnecting while doing our High School Musical and becoming closer than ever. We have so many more stories that I could tell, like putting ourselves in the Star Wars or Pokemon universes whenever we were hanging out as kids, but that would take all night. But some important stories that stand out in our friendship, though, are all the shows and movies we've watched and related to. Lots of those being Disney fairy tales and rom-coms. And now you have your very own love story that I've loved seeing grow from the very beginning to now on this special day. John, I love how you make Laura laugh, and I love seeing how in love you two are. You're up for anything she throws at you, from doing yoga with goats, arts and crafts, and projects around your house, and doing projects around your house together. You make a great team. And that was evident from the first time we met and you and Lauren made pizzas together for everyone at Camp Dearborn. And I got to thinking, making a pizza is kind of a perfect analogy for a marriage, and for making a marriage work. First, you have your dough, your foundation. That's the love that you have for each other. As long as you have a strong foundation, your pizza will hold together. Then the sauce that represents life. Sometimes there's too much where it feels like everything is about to overflow. But with a good foundation to hold you together, you'll be able to withstand anything. And no good pizza is complete without the toppings. Those are the cheesy jokes, your personalities, your friends and family, and all the other variety your story brings. It is the spice of life after all. Put all of these toppings on your foundation and sauce and bake at 450 degrees for 50 plus years, and that'll be something truly delicious. Today is just another chapter in your love story. Hopefully soon there will be more chapters filled with stories of our kids dressing up like their favorite cartoon characters. More trips to Disney, hopefully. And just more moments that make you completely and perfectly and incandescently happy. Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont, Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont, Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont. To Laura and John.
And next will be a toast from a man that is both the brother of the groom and the best man. A round of applause, please, for Mr. Christopher Beaumont.
Thank you. Okay, I hope you will forgive me for using note cards. As you saw at the wedding today, John has this reputation for just destroying speeches, and so the prospect of giving him a toast sets a bar pretty high, so hopefully I'll live up to John's reputation. And these notes will keep me tight and in the pocket, so I hit everything I need. Okay, in conclusion, no, wait. I should have numbered these. Okay, back on track, momentum. Okay, so the role of the toast, as I understand, is to both kind of provide an encouraging assessment of the couple and to offer some advice based on my experience about your new journey together. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm John's oldest brother. You've met Matt, who's John's also oldest brother. John is the youngest, Matt is the middle. And so growing up, I feel like it was always easy to kind of tell Matt and I apart. Matt was the one with blonde hair who liked sports and looked like mom. I was the math and science kid who had brown hair and looked like dad. But then John complicated that because he was also kind of a math and science kid. He also had brown hair, he looked like dad. So I feel like the role that John fell into was like, John was kind of like me, but just like a little weirder, I guess. So you've heard a lot of these stories. I'll give you a couple more. Matt and I agreed that since I went to college when John was 12, I would focus on childhood, he would focus on high school. So when John was about 9, he got into this kind of vibe of inventing things, and everything he invented also needed a slogan for reasons we didn't fully understand. The first thing that he invented was John Weiser beer. And this made us nervous for what John was getting up to with his friends. But then we found out that the slogan for John Weiser beer was John Weiser beer, the thing that burns the string.
That's not the whole slogan. So John Weisler Beer, the thing that burns the string, don't take my word for it, try it. You might like it. After this, nobody was concerned that John had ever had a drop of beer in his life. John also invented this card game called Kablamo, Give Me Your Ammo. You can tell that rhyming was a big part of inventing. The slogan for that was, it's the only game where cheating is part of the game. But as far as I can tell, John has never revealed the rules to Kablamo, Give Me Your Ammo to anybody, but I'm confident they exist. He did show us the rules to another game he invented called Ace of Spades, which was incredibly complicated until somebody drew the Ace of Spades and they just won the game. It wasn't the best. Okay, so this has always just been John's way. I think John has always followed his train of thought wherever it went. And that's, sometimes it takes him to unusual places. I guess like a life lesson that I learned later on is that it's the weird kids that usually become the most interesting people, because weird kid is a shorthand for having a bunch of really admirable qualities, like having the creativity to kind of form your own worldview and the determination and the courage to stick with that. And so being a quirky kid has made John both a quirky adult, but I think also a really interesting and impressive one. And as John has matured, I think those same qualities have led him to very interesting and impressive places. So as you know, John has decided to get a PhD, and then he decided to run marathons and then race in triathlons. These are just things that John decided to do because he decided they were the right thing to do. And that's not the kind of thinking that a normie does. That's a kind of thinking that a weirdo does. And I think that's the better way to think. And so I'm always very kind of impressed with the way John approaches life. And I feel like there's been this subtle rearrangement of dynamics in the Beaumont brothers, where John has gone from Chris, but just a little bit weirder, where nowadays I feel like I am John, but just a little bit less so, or less impressive. And I'm fine with that. So I've known Laura for a few years, obviously not as well as John. She's a wonderful addition to our family. I always love spending time with Laura. She's warm and very articulate. The articulate part is great because, as we've also said, John can sometimes be up in the clouds, and I feel like Laura becomes this like John translator at times, which is always great to have around. But I think what encourages me most about John and Laura's relationship is I feel like Laura keeps John weird, by which I mean like John feels more like John when he's around Laura, and that's a great thing to have. And I don't know Laura as well, but I think it's true that the reverse is also true, that John brings out the weird in Laura, and you two, I think, reinforce each other. You choose your own path, and I think that's really great. Okay, so that's the assessment part. So what's the advice part? This is tricky for me because I feel like we've come to two conclusions. The first is John is basically me, but a little bit better. And the second is that John and Laura are both just very good at figuring out their own way. So how do you give advice to things like that? I guess my advice is just keep doing what you're doing, right? Like keep being weird, keep figuring out your own thing. Nobody has the answers anyways. And so I feel like if you stick together and you kind of keep charting your own path, you'll be great. But that feels a little bit unsatisfying. I feel like, after all, I'm 6 years older than John. I've been married for a while. I've started a family. I should be able to offer at least one piece of advice based on my experience that would be helpful for you. So I did some soul searching, and I did identify one thing. It's something that I feel like has guided me through a lot of hard times. It's the closest thing I can come to like a cheat code for marriage. So if you kind of stick with this, I feel like you'll be okay. Shoot, where was that last conclusion? Okay, whatever. Happy something, John and Laura. Okay. All right.
And now I'd like to invite Sister Nancy to please come on up here to say the blessing as she makes her way. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please, for Sister Nancy.
Thank you. Sweetheart, nobody called me that in a long time. Thanks, Josh. And Laura, John, it's a privilege to be able to do this. And in my time, we had a song that went like, all you need is love, da, 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 da. All you need is love, da, da, da. And I sing it on pitch. All you need is love, love, love. Thank you, chorus. That's right. Well, that's what one song said. But in another, what shall I say, piece of advice, okay, St. Paul wrote in Corinthians that there are three things that last: faith, hope, and love. And love is the best. So as we celebrate your love for each other and being here tonight, I wish you all the best as we pray. So God, we thank you for these gifts of faith, hope, and love, and for celebrating the love that we see manifested here by these two wonderful people, these two awesome people, these two people who are pledging to each other to love each other for the rest of their lives. We ask you to be with them and to help them to make each day special. May they not only have faith in each other, may they not only trust each other, may they not only love each other, but realize that all the people who are here celebrating with them and all their loved ones who have been part of their life have brought them to this day. May the love that they share continue to help them to grow and glow and to be to each other what they dreamed they would be on this evening, on this day. We ask you to help them to use their gift of trust and hope so that when challenges in life come, they will be true to each other. And we realize that the love that they have now will continue to grow as long as they think of each other. We ask you to bless their parents and their families who have brought them to this point in their life. We ask you always, God, to watch over them and to watch over all that will be part of their lives. As we ask you to bless our meal tonight, every time they sit for a meal, may they realize that the nourishment that they take at their meal will help them to continue to nourish each other. So be with us, be with them, and bless the food that we are going to eat so that we may be strong enough to give them the love, the faith, the hope that they need so that truly the love will last forever. We make our prayer in your name, O God. Amen.
Amen.
That was fantastic. A round of applause, please, for Sister Nancy. Well, there you have it. I would typically not suggest having that amount of toast with that amount of time because most of the time the guests are going to get restless. They're going to be wondering where the food is. But this was one of those cases where it absolutely 100% worked. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, check us out on Instagram, and I will see you at the next wedding.